Hello and welcome to the Discovering Spirituality podcast, Episode 3, Spiritual Interpretation. In this podcast, I will be sharing my thoughts on the writing Spiritual Interpretation, taken from the channel book The Light in Your Life is Spirit by George A. Thomson. For many, the most sought-after state of being is happiness. People just want to be happy. The trouble is, most people have a rather limited perception of what happiness is. It is usually associated with the external, wealth, power, and satisfaction of desires. But when the fleeting success is over, there is still a yearning for more, and so the cycle continues. This is in general how society frames success, and when all is said and done, what are you left with? More to the point, what do you have? It's funny how the path of true meaning is at odds with the false meaning which is defined by society. In fact, they are polar opposites. When the individual succumbs to how society defines life's purpose, it is clear that they are not thinking for themselves. To exist within a society, there are certain responsibilities and frameworks. Most of the population live confined within these frameworks, which creates varying degrees of resentment that is tolerated by the populace. One could consider this masochistic in essence, heaped with a healthy dose of justification. There is always the blame and resentment that one's desires are not being met. This has created many destructive and toxic ideologies. These social ideals create victims and casualties due to the failure of meeting these social ideals. For those on the periphery, these ideas may be viewed in a more revealing way, which can sour the individual's need to meet the social ideals that offer very little of value. There are those within this group of misfits that recognize that what truly gives meaning to life lies in the depths of emotional experience, particularly positive emotional experience, when care and compassion are extended to others, in a word, selflessness. This is a state when the need to fulfill one's desires take a back seat and cultivating human connections provides a more satisfying meaning to life. This particular cycle of dissatisfaction has become increasingly prevalent over the last 100 years as fiscal prosperity has become more accessible. With increased prosperity came stronger cravings for what was promoted as being an ideal. That ideal revolved around things. So the acquisition of these things became the purpose, the drive, the focus. For the peasant class, their life was one of hardship, but this was a hardship that they accepted. They knew they could never attain the same levels of wealth and status that was afforded to the upper classes. There were those that found a greater meaning in life. How you were carried more weight with attributes like character, integrity, courage, and patience, having a more meaningful value. Many of these positive virtues were lost in the upper classes, since they had not experienced the same degree of suffering as the peasant class did. But once educated and the ability to read became more prevalent, the great shift occurred, and the peasant that was educated could and would challenge the authority of the ruling class, and so society divided into the working class, the middle class, and the upper middle class, for the sake of simplicity. It was the merchant classes that posed the greatest threat because they realized that money was able to purchase power, influence, and the all-important status. It was this merchant class that started to redefine happiness for the masses. So man entered the age of money, vanity, and power, and with that, the identity was all that mattered. Material wealth opened the floodgates of desire because by having money, the individual had access to satisfy them. Desires are the illusions, the hungers that cannot be satisfied. Desires and avarice fuels and maintains the current social and political structures. How we live is defined by this model. How we vote, how we are educated, how we work is all about the fulfillment of human desires. In modern Western societies, specifically located in and around cities, the pace of life and the accompanying social pressures leave little space for self-acknowledgement, these being the moments of self-reflection to truly understand who you are. Silence terrifies most people, because within this space or state, one has the potential to experience discomfort, which could lead the individual to question one's drives and motivations. This is a generalization. But let's face it, People do not want their identity and the accompanying lifestyle choices to be challenged in any way, perhaps because it will cause them to think and question their reasons for living. Imagine that you are conditioned from an early age to achieve certain goals and benchmarks of success, only then to realize the uncomfortable truth that the driving force behind one's motivations have very little meaning and lack any true fulfillment. Wouldn't you want to avoid that? If most people truly acknowledged what made them the happiest, they would be quite shocked. The meaning of life has been interwoven within the distorted meaning of success, which are naturally at odds with each other. What you are left with is a deep inner dissatisfaction that cannot be understood or explained. It's just there. There are, of course, lots of signposts we come across within our lifetime that offer some insight into why we feel dissatisfied, but very often they go ignored. Why? There are a lot of philosophical and spiritual texts that have been penned over the last several thousand years, which does hold a lot of truth, but despite having these truths within them, they too have caused their fair share of conflicts, creating tribes with varying degrees of attitudes about life and how it's supposed to be lived. The trouble with these ideologies is that they create converts and not independently thinking individuals. Yet another means of self-identification that limits human potential. The spirit of life, the essence of life, what it takes to truly live, to think for oneself, and to live as a balanced individual who has inner peace, and who understands inner peace and how to achieve it. But what is inner peace? Is it to know your own being, God's being? Is it to know your true identity? I know what I am, and not just who I am. To consciously and willingly live life to create and discover a state of being. To consciously accept the physical reality and see it for what it is, as a means to grow and to discover who you truly are. The more conscious you become, the more aware you become of the consciousness of your origins. That is, the consciousness of all the knowing. This can be used as a guide to navigate you towards the goals of your growth. It is when you are at peace that you can connect with this consciousness on a deeper level. There, the path looks the brightest. With this knowing, you will see your existence from an alternative perspective. New opportunities will present themselves, new challenges will be experienced, causing your mind to shift. How can I be a better person today would be a good thought to start each day. On the surface, this seems like a reasonable request, but in truth, it is very far-reaching and involves having a perceptive mind that is paying attention. But what should we be paying attention to? It is always a good idea to maintain mindfulness. This is a skill that needs to be developed, as well as recognizing the difference between mental chatter and true thought. You may come across moments when there is something you don't understand. This is your opportunity to ask a question or to ask for help. You will be surprised at how this help comes. Sometimes it can be obvious. The search for meaning. How do you find meaning? How do you understand? Can you understand it on your own merits without the default reaction, which is to take someone else's word for it? You may come across many different concepts that have already been discussed or contemplated by many a learned individual, but those are their thoughts, their ideas. There is no shame in figuring things and discovering for yourself. Beholding the ideas of others is the easy option. This is why so many people find solitude in religious teachings. But do they truly understand them? For example, how do you know there is a God? Or that you have a soul, and it's your responsibility to grow that soul? You can read the text, it may resonate with you, but how do you actually know? How do you know that God helps you? Do you feel it? Do you see it? Again, how do you know? Spiritual interpretation is a mindset, an openness to discover. It is a way of life, a commitment to live as a free-thinking individual. It is a choice. It is a choice to live. It is to acknowledge that you can choose, not just to understand, but to choose how to live your life. When you choose how you can live your life, you are taking responsibility for yourself. You are the one that is investing in the direction you see fit. You are providing meaning and purpose to your life. You are the one that nurtures yourself. You are the one who thinks and challenges your truths, your values, and your virtues. You are the one who creates your own reality. So what do you want out of this reality? What meaning will you discover? The conflict of the twin paths. There is the primitive and there is the spiritual. But are you consciously aware which path you walk? Have you even made a conscious choice? For those who follow the path of religion, consciously there is a choice to lead a life that is supposed to be dedicated to growth. Many fall short. There are those who believe that by pure reason alone, an individual can determine the growth of their being intellectually. Ancient philosophers pondered the topic of how to lead a good life and what it took thousands of years ago. Much of the moral fabric of today's Western society is based on Judeo-Christian teachings, so the concept of living a good life has clearly been thought about at length for a significant amount of time. Currently, in modern society, there seems to be an endless battle waging over who knows best about being a good human being. Everyone seems to have an opinion on the subject. Judeo-Christian values have been on the decline for a long time, and atheism has seen a steady increase. The battle between faith and reason. But for the modern masses, we are fixated on distractions and utterly aware of why we remain so unhappy, despite living with a degree of prosperity never before experienced in human history. Why? What is missing? What have we forgotten? But more importantly, what are we not paying attention to? Is it that we have denied God? For the majority, the search for God has been abandoned. That is, until they find themselves backed into a corner. It does not take too long before hands will be raised in prayer the moment we feel helpless. But what is helplessness? The opposite of being in control. What if we eased off our application of control? Would we descend into chaos or find order? Free will is not only used to make choices, but used primarily to manifest control. Control offers the illusion of security and certainty. It provides us with a certain degree of self-assurance, confidence, and arrogance. Arrogance meaning that we somehow know how to pilot the ship and understand what direction to take, so to speak. The truth is, we are all just floating about in a massive sea of uncertainty, never really knowing or understanding what lies ahead of us. But one thing is certain, and that is at some point we will shed this mortal coil. Death comes to us all, and what we do in between birth and death needs to matter. But most people have trouble figuring this out. Life, for the most part, is about survival. We all matter individually and collectively. We all have the choice to accept or deny God. We can determine our purpose, and we are responsible for nurturing the life we have. We have the power to create or destroy, to give and to take. Human nature and divine nature, two wolves fighting. Whichever one wins is the one you feed the most. And those were my thoughts on the writing Spiritual Interpretation. If you're interested in reading the writing from the book The Light in Your Life is Spirit, you can download it from the link below. If you liked the topic discussed in this video, please feel free to subscribe and hit the like button. Also, by hitting the notification button, you can stay up to date when a new podcast is uploaded. Thank you for listening.